Greetings and welcome back to my channel. I am Ken McAuliffe, the Jazz Vinyl Audio File. I'm not the philiac, I'm the file. Welcome back to my storage room where you see records behind me and boxes above. But I want to talk about the greatest no longer living jazz composer of the latter half of the 20th century. And that's easily Wayne Shorter. Through his early records, through Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, through Miles Davis, through Weather Report, to his final group, his last album, Emanon. I had to listen to it quite a bit. It's not an easily attainable recording, but boy, what a wonderful record that is. It distills the essence of who Wayne Shorter was with that great final band of Danilo Perez, John Patitucci, and Brian Blade. But I just wanted to go through some of his records, my favorite records of Wayne's, and urge you, if you don't have any of these records, to start buying them. Because to me, these are the most important records in jazz of the last half of the 20th century. I mean, Wayne Shorter's compositions go from, he wrote ballads per se, like Lost, that are just so searingly beautiful and deep and aching, really, to, more up-tempo things. I can't remember the titles off the top of my head, but they were just, complex, deep, and because his compositions are so deep, he got some of the best performances out of people like Herbie Hancock and McCoy Tyner and Lee Morgan and Reggie Workman and Elvin Jones and all these incredible players of the 60s that we all adore and worship. And I really believe Wayne Shorter's records are the greatest records on Blue Note. They are for me. His work with Miles Davis, that is the greatest period of the Miles Davis band. And you can hear his early work, and the signature begins with Art Blakey. His signature was always there. His melodies sort of always asked questions from 5 different angles. He's asking the same question. The melodies resolve, but there's still a question. They're so probing. Wayne grew up in Newark, New Jersey, which is about a 20-minute stop from Penn Station. I know he was way into comic books. Had a very creative space alien mind from a young age. His first albums were on VJ, I believe, Waning Moments and Introducing Lee Morgan, before he joined Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. And on every one of the albums I'm going to show you, at least, Wayne's tunes are the greatest tunes on the records. And these, to me, are the essential Art Blakey records as well. His music, it was so timeless. It spanned so many emotions. It was so unusual in so many ways. And, he had the great foils, such as Freddie Hubbard or Lee Morgan, that he went to play with later on his own records. Swinging very hard. I read somewhere, that he was influenced by Coltrane. I guess everybody was influenced by Coltrane, but I think Wayne Shorter's saxophone playing was thoroughly original. Never sounded like anybody else to me. I don't hear anybody else in it. Maybe some Dexter Gordon here and there. But even on the records that aren't in the jazz canon, like he obviously played his solo on Asia. And I want to give a shout out to Norman Maslow, who sort of inspired me to do this. He did an overview yesterday, and it got me thinking, I'll do an overview too. But his solo on Asia, on top of one of the greatest drum solos of all time. And I was just reading recently, he said he went in, it wasn't a big deal, it was a couple tracks, a couple takes, and he was off. Or maybe that was the Donald Fagen, Walter Becker interview about it. But amazing work. And you can hear the essence of what he's doing on these records. And while he's recording all his own solo records, he joins Miles Davis, of course. And these aren't in order, but on this record he contributes Paraphernalia. And this group is so wide open, reacting to Ornette Coleman, really reacting to the culture at large in America at the time. These very urban records, very exploratory. They're hard charging. They're just explosive recordings. Because Tony Williams is just on fire and he drove everybody really hard. Miles Philly D. Kilimanjaro. These are all Miles Davis tunes, I believe, which is kind of unusual. The band is so explosive on here. And it got me to thinking, Wayne played with Tony on all these records, but I don't think Tony Williams is on any of the Wayne Shorter records. It's like he wanted something different. And he usually has Elvin or Joe Chambers, very different drummers from Tony Williams. Miles Smiles, this contains the Footprints, which became a standard, Orbits, which became a standard, and Dolores, all by Miles, by Wayne. And I don't really, to me, all these records are not really interchangeable as the group starts out. Like the first recording by the group is ESP. Wayne wrote the title track, ESP, on the song Iris. Things are a little more contained and a little more adhering to maybe traditional forms, traditional in a very loose way. And Kilimanjaro is the last record where it's just total wide open blowing. Sorcerer, beautiful record, Cicely Tyson on the cover. Wayne contributed Prince of Darkness, Masqualero, Limbo, Veneta. Limbo is kind of a standard. Masqualero, there was a group on ECM in the 70s that called themselves Masqualero, I'm sure after that track. My personal favorite of all these records, Nefertiti, again, Wayne wrote the title track, as well as Fall, which is just beyond belief, and Pinocchio. Pinocchio became another standard. Chick Corea used to play that and recorded it, I believe. You know, this is the, these records are so surreal and explosive and cinematic and yearning and dark and bittersweet and hard in a way, because they're really reacting to the trauma that was in this country that was just bowling over in the mid to late 1960s, the riots in all the major cities. And these are also just very beautiful records. Miles in the Sky, well, that's when we started with. Wayne contributed paraphernalia. So, you know, in this group, there's so many, you know, he's got Wayne Shorter, he's got Herbie Hancock, amazing composers. When I interviewed Wayne Shorter, I guess it was 2018 or 2019 for Stereophile, I asked him, what did Miles say when you joined the band? He said, Miles said, bring your book, because he knew Wayne was a great composer and he wanted those compositions. And when he had Bill Evans in the group, he had amazing compositions. So let's start with, I don't have the years on these, but I was sort of, this is my favorite Wayne Shorter album, Night Dreamer, and this is his first record on Blue Note. You can tell this is a well-played copy. This is a mono copy. I mean, these tunes are just, I've said before that I have to kind of be in the right frame of mind to listen to these records, the Wayne Shorter albums, this one in particular, because it's so intense and emotionally searing. And of course you have the wonderful performances. This is with Elvin, Reginald Workman, McCoy Tyner, Lee Morgan. They're just, you know, the sound of all his records are masterpieces in my estimation, and this is, to me, the greatest one, just because I particularly like the melodies and the performances are really beautiful. Followed by Juju, also with Elvin Jones, McCoy Tyner, Reggie Workman, a quartet. Just more of the same, beautiful. For a long time, this was the only record you could really find of Wayne on Blue Note. This was a popular one. It was reissued more for whatever strange reason. Speak No Evil, also incredibly popular, maybe the most popular and the most favorite among the great majority of people, with Freddie Hubbard, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Elvin Jones. Has amazing songs like Fee Fi Fo Fum and Dance Cadaverous, Infant Eyes, which is such a beautiful ballad. You know, the way he constructed his notes, there was so much intensity from note to note, and the phrases, they were just so, you know, it was all very orchestral on a small scale and so incredibly intimate. The way that his melodies would just get inside your head and weave their own spider web and weave their own spell. They were just so intense. And a good friend of mine, Tom Chang, who's a musician in the city, plays all over town, he says those, you know, when I was a studying sort of jazz cat, people called standards. He said now, you know, these are the standards that people call to play, because they're such great compositions. Then I have three versions of, well, two rather, of The Soothsayer. This is the Japanese pressing. James Spaulding, Freddie Hubbard. Oh, this one has Tony Williams on it, the only one I know of. Ron Carter, McCoy Tyner. This has Lost, the amazing song Lady Day for Billie Holiday. But Lost is just searingly beautiful, man. And this is the LT version that came out in the 70s. I haven't really compared the sound of these. Then I have a couple versions of Etc., which is next. This is the Tone Poet. Great. I mean, all these records are so great. To think they held a few of them back. They held back Schizophrenia, The Soothsayer, Etc. They held all those back, which is like, wow. And that's, again, the LT cover. TV sets, really futuristic, right? And this is when Wayne begins begins to react to the free movement that was really, really happening, the Back to Africa movement in jazz, all the spiritual jazz stuff, which is what they call it now, was coming out of Chicago and Detroit and LA. This has his brother Alan Shorter, Grasham Mancour, James Spaulding, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Joe Chambers, and things are a little less concrete, and they start to open up more. There's longer improvisations, more open forms. Adam's Apple is a little bit of regression. A lot of this album is really funky. Again, with Herbie Hancock and Joe Chambers. And all these records almost entirely by Wayne. This has 502 Blues by Jimmy Riles, his own version of Footprints on here, which I do think the Miles Davis version of Footprints is better than the version on here. Another incredible record, Schizophrenia. Has Tom Thumb, which is amazing. Go, Schizophrenia, Kryptonite, which goes back to his love of science fiction. Miyako for his wife, Playground. Curtis Fuller, James Spaulding, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Joe Chambers. Just, you got to get all these records. If you want to go into the deep end of jazz, this is where you go. You start to feel the influence of fusion coming about. Supernova. They cover Water Babies, which he also wrote for Miles. They covered Dindy, Joe Beam's Dindy, and it's really beautiful. I don't have Native Dancer, which is the album I think he did in Brazil with Milton Nascimento. What a beautiful record that is. There's so much beauty, intense beauty, fragile beauty, yearning beauty in all his music. It just, it's just this compression in his melodies, the way they enter your head and they won't let you go. They're just astounding melodies. They're so haunting. Moto Grosso Fio. Now we're really starting to get out there. But I like this record a lot. I haven't listened to this as much. Wayne Shorter, Chick Corea, Ron Carter, John McLaughlin, Dave Holland, Michelin Prell on drums, and this is very much, we're also seeing the reaction to Bitches Brew, which he played on, and in a silent way. Odyssey of Iska. Again, this is really, it's not as avant-garde as Albert Ayler or some of the Pharoah Sanders stuff. To me, it's much more listenable, because Wayne just could not help but play with incredible beauty. Even when he switched to soprano, it was just so intense. So, he was an intense musician. And then this is a collection, The Collector, a Japanese recording. I interviewed him twice, once in the early 90s for a jazz fusion overview for Jazz Times. And he said his favorite drummer then was Eric Gravatt. He also talked about he didn't like drummers who always played on the one, which was kind of, every rock and funk drummer plays on the one, jazz drummers not necessarily. But then for Eminem, he was just, when I interviewed him for Stereophile for that, he was just, every answer was sort of profound and never what you would expect. He always took things in a different direction from where you thought he would go. It was just, what a brilliant, brilliant mind. Up until the end of our interview, we started, and when we did the interview, he had just recovered from lung surgery. He only had one lung, I believe, at the end of his life. And he started talking about suicide, how suicide was not something bad. It was just a different choice that different people took, and they're now in a different place. He was just so brilliant and such an amazing thinker, an incredible loss for jazz. And in a way, to me, it sort of seals something as the end of that influence in contemporary jazz, which is a whole nother question. But and we still have Herbie, obviously. We still have Ron Carter, but Wayne is extra special. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great day.